So our aim, we are recording, so that reminds me, we are recording this for those who aren't able to join. If you have any questions at any point, please do put it in the chat. Claire Perrier, one of our PhD students here at Edinburgh, will be monitoring the chat and is going to curate the questions on our behalf, and she will then ask them when we get to the Q&A. We were hoping to have representation from the food and drink team at the Scottish Government, but unfortunately they have had a COVID outbreak within the team and they are all laid low or on annual leave. So we send their apologies on their behalf. So you are, it is me and myself that will take you through today. We will aim to speak for about 40 to 45 minutes or so, and then there will be opportunity for questions. And I'm really pleased to see such an array of people from across public authorities, local authorities, academia, and other civil society organisations. So next slide, please. So just to start off, because many of you may have heard of the Scottish Food Coalition, but just to remind you who we are a civil society coalition of approximately 48 organisations. And we're made up of a really diverse range of established organisations, both very small and also very large, local to international, who are working on issues related to environment, poverty, health, workers' rights, food production, community food and growing, and animal and fish welfare. We first came together in 2016, and I've had the huge privilege of chairing the coalition since 2018. And we came together in recognition of the problems in our current food system and how they are interconnected and cannot be changed by individual organisations or by focusing on single issues. We also, really importantly, have a vibrant group of food ambassadors across the country who represent communities and groups across Scotland and who have played an invaluable role in bringing their lived experiences and those of the groups they represent to our discussions, activities, and associated associated work. Since our creation, we have been consistently calling for a just transition to a better food system for all in Scotland. Our collective goal has been to drive for food system transformation, primarily under the basis of a new Good Food Nation bill for Scotland, in order to support healthier people, land, water, animals and fish, to support and drive stronger, resilient and vibrant communities throughout Scotland, to help to develop and facilitate thriving local economies, food businesses and organisations, to help support the generation and continuation of good jobs in agriculture and food with fair work standards and clear pathways and support for development, and to stimulate lively, diverse and healthy food cultures and environments that put people and the natural environment at their heart. And at the heart of what we've tried to do with our members is to bring together our collective expertise, but to then develop a more collective voice through all of our own insights, evidence, experiences. We believe a successful food system is one that delivers high levels of well-being, social justice and environmental stewardship, now for all and for future generations in Scotland and beyond. Before I go any further, and this is my first opportunity publicly, because some will know that I was cycling around the southwest of Ireland when the bill got passed, I would like to publicly thank all of our member organisations and ambassadors for their generosity of spirit, the time and resources that they have dedicated to the coalition since 2016, their unwavering support and commitment to the vision, and to us who have been leading at the top, are leading the coalition, and their attendance and commitment to the activities of the coalition. The resilience that our members have shown in the face of such demanding personal and professional circumstances, and the honesty, tenacity, and at times vulnerability we have all brought to the work we have been doing. Next slide, please. So I think it's useful for us to just take a step back and to really reflect on the long and winding road, that I sound like an Irish country western singer, but the long and winding road that Scottish food policy has taken. And really the genesis, as we know, of Scotland's food policy was the first version of the Recipe for Success, published in 2009. That had a much more industry focused, and it was evolved and developed to be a more holistic document and sort of reflection on food policy in Scotland in 2014. And at that stage, a non-statutory food commission was established, of which Pete Ritchie, executive director of Nourish and one of the leading members of the coalition, was a member of. In 2018, that non-statutory food commission published their final report, calling for a Good Food Nation bill, and in particular at that stage also, I think, calling for a statutory independent food commission, which we'll get to later. And in 2018, a consultation was published for looking for views and evidence to shape a Good Food Nation bill going forward, or to decide whether a Good Food Nation bill was in fact needed. In 2019, the Good Food Nation bill made a slightly surprised appearance on the 1920 legislative programme for government. It didn't originally appear on it, but it did eventually appear on it in September 2019. As everyone knows, the world changed and turned on its axis in March 2020. And while the Good Food Nation bill had been written under the stewardship of the Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewing, it was temporarily suspended due to COVID-19. And in May 2021, following the Scottish elections in May, a new Cabinet Secretary was appointed to the portfolio of Rural Affairs and Natural Environment. And that is when Mary Brennan stepped into the lead political role. From then, we also had, I think, importantly, an appointment of a new head of food policy for the Scottish Government. So there were some major civil service developments in terms of the team that was leading in relation to food policy more broadly. And that is when Ash Cook was appointed as head of food policy, and subsequently he has gone on now to become Deputy Director of Food and Drink. The draft Good Food Nation bill was slightly, again unexpectedly, published on the 7th of October 2021, and since then we have quite swiftly, I think, and quite though with great care and attention, gone through the bill process. And on the 14th of June, the Good Food Nation Scotland bill was passed unanimously by the Scottish Parliament, following a comprehensive stage 1 process where evidence was submitted and delivered, both written and oral, from a whole range of stakeholders. And I think at this point it is worth noting the care and attention that both the parliamentary clerks in charge of the committee and the committee itself took in ensuring there was a real breadth of voices and evidence presented. So we are now at the stage where the Good Food Nation bill is finalised. It is published on the parliamentary website if you go into the bill itself, and it is now in the process of being submitted for royal assent. We do not have an exact timetable for that, but we are expecting that it will receive royal assent later in 2022. Within that, there is a 12-month, essentially 12-month development period from once the act takes effect, in which the specifics of the bill will be developed, and I'll get onto those in a little bit more detail on the next slide. So that is our timeline, and I'm really keen that we celebrate that what has been achieved and the role that all different stakeholders have played in exploring and developing and debating the nuances and the challenges and the complexity associated with food systems transformation. Next slide, please. Okay, my pictures are in the way. So just in a snapshot, and for people who want more detail, I can provide more detail. And of course, you can read the bill, because definitely at this stage, the devil is in the detail. Though it is, we are happier, I think, on mature reflection of how well the bill has evolved through the bill process and how much strength has been added to the bill. I think it's also worth noting that that unanimous support and that cross-party sort of interrogation and support and development of the bill was really important to its final outcomes. So in the bill is a snapshot. There is a statement. So we have not got the right to food incorporated in this bill. There was huge amounts of discussion around this. That will be part of the new human rights bill that is due for consultation in the latter part of 2022, early 2023. But we got a strong statement that adequate food is a human right and essential to the realization of other human rights, and that must be due regard must be given to that when the national and local food plans are developed. The bill is designed to drive improvements in health and well-being, environmental, social and economic outcomes. This is at the heart of what we have argued, and many others, to be this sort of systemic view, to take the systemic approach to understanding the way in which food impacts on and drives both outcomes of and improvements in these key areas. So all the national food plan and the local food plans, which we will get to, all have to again take into consideration and develop outcomes and indicators of progress that will be able to demonstrate where these improvements are being achieved. It places responsibilities only on public authorities and selected bodies, though it has not necessarily gone into detail beyond local authorities currently and health boards to produce good food nation plans. So there will be a responsibility, a legislative requirement for Scotland to have a national food plan, good food nation plan, and for all of our local authorities and health boards to produce their own good food nation plans. And that is where the development phase through the 12 months from when the bill is enacted, that is where there will be a lot of development of the toolkits and support and the consultation processes to get those first plans up and running. And I think everyone expects that that will be an iterative process and that they won't be perfect to start off with, but that it will be a process and a journey that we will go on. And I expect that this journey will take us a period of time. It won't happen in the first iteration, but that it will be when we look back in 10, 15, 20 years time, we will see just what the role this legislative shift and this legislative requirement to produce, report on and review progress on the national and local food plans will have on the way in which we do food in Scotland. It requires what is termed in the bill inclusive public consultation, and that is to ensure that the mechanisms of consultation and the materials and the approaches taken ensure that there is it is open to all, irrespective of their backgrounds, their literacy skills, and other abilities. The plans will need to outline a set of outcomes and indicators of progress. There is some ambiguity potentially within it as it stands as to how aligned the outcomes from national food plans will be with the national food plan will be with those with local food plans. So I think a lot of the devil will be in that detail about how the national and local food plans come together to deliver a common direction of travel, an agreed set of common outcomes, and a set of indicators of progress, with the recognition that there will be evolution and development as that goes, and that there needs to be a recognition of the differences across local authorities, both in terms of geographical resources and other issues. It is without doubt a systems-orientated legislative framework that is designed to drive stronger policy coherence, legislative compatibility and parliamentary scrutiny. And I think that will be, again, we will have to see how through future bills, in particular, the agriculture bill, the circular economy bill, the national care service, which is currently in its stage 1, and other associated bills, how this bill will influence and shape and be used to ensure that there is a coherency and compatibility between how we do food and how we support agriculture, how we drive towards a stronger environmental protection, etc. And then finally, and this did take right up until the last minute, the government supported an amendment by the Greens to create a new independent food commission. So within that development period of 12 months, there will be the development of a new independent food commission, similar we expect in structure and size to the existing Scottish Land Commission, though there is a lot of working out of that to do, and they will be responsible for scrutinising, reporting, and will have the legislative flexibility to make recommendations, formal recommendations and advice to local authorities, health boards, and to national government. The Independent Food Commission will not report to any particular cabinet secretary and will operate in the same model as other independent commissions, such as the Land Commission, as we said. Next slide, please. Now, I've been taking a lot of time to reflect and sort of make sense of what's been going on, and this quote helped me balance both the positive celebratory side of me and the glass half full side of me, with also the need to be reflective. So I want to very publicly say that I think it is hugely important that all of us celebrate this milestone as we prepare for the road ahead. And I firmly believe the real work is going to start now, and that the success of where we have got to is in our hands, and will be developed through the evolution of the plans and the work of the Commission going forward. But also, I think, and I've seen this myself on the ground as I travelled around Scotland for the last 3 or 4 months as part of the work we've been doing, is that there is huge energy, there is great innovation, there is substantive creativity happening already. And part of what this bill is there to do is to really bring that to life, to give it greater legitimacy, to raise the profile of agriculture and food in this country. And Jim Fairley quite often discussed this in evidence. It was about saying we're not starting from zero. There is many good things happening, but we have to also be cautious and reflective as we go forward. Next slide. So in that spirit, I have a celebratory slide and I have a let's be reflective slide. And I just wanted to bring the quote. This was released on Twitter on, I think, the day after. And this is from Michael Thackeray, the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, who's been incredibly supportive and very vocal about how significant this achievement is for Scotland globally, and what it says to the global food community and to the global political community in terms of how Scotland is approaching food and food policy, and in particular aspects around the right to food. He sees it as a key victory that is part of the broader goal of transforming our global food system. And I think that is worth celebrating and worth holding with us as we go forward. In celebration, I think we have a strong and constructive cross-party collaboration, as I said, and unanimous support. Commitment to outcomes and indicators of progress. It's not as far as many were asking for in terms of specific targets on the face of the bill, but it is very clear around the need for outcomes and indicators of progress. I think it is somewhat softer than hard targets, but as many of us have argued, there are already a set of common targets that many are working to across public health, environment, net zero, food poverty, etc. We have to celebrate and embrace, and I think drive and influence the development of the Scottish Food Commission, but it provides the independent oversight and strong parliamentary scrutiny. There's also some, things hidden within there around affirmative action that, and the role of the Parliament. And I would congratulate the politicians for the courage that they showed in holding themselves to account or ensuring that they will be held to account within this. There is inclusive multi-stakeholder engagement and consultation built in, and pretty much there is a clear timeline. It's still a little fuzzy for development, reporting and review, which essentially from when we get royal assent will be a 6-year process in total, and then there would be a review and a redevelopment of the plans. Next slide. So we have to celebrate the breadth and development of what the bill has become, but I'm very keen that we take that a pause for reflection to reflect on the ongoing concerns and the road ahead. We need to draw, where possible, our strength and energy from these challenges. There is, without doubt, both at a producer level and at a household level, and everywhere in between, acute cost of living crisis and rising costs of inputs. It is making food production, it is making all aspects of the supply chain incredibly precarious, and it is leaving households both cold and hungry. And we cannot lose sight of that, and we cannot forget how acute that is for individuals and households. There is significant financial, human resource and supply chain challenges and constraints operating, and that is none more so than in the school food or public food supply chain. And some of the stories I've heard of the challenges in acquiring equipment and acquiring delivery vans, in price rises for basic items are just mind-blowing. There is a whole raft of upcoming bills that we have to keep on top of and to drive home the message for strong coherence and legislative compatibility. As argued by Alistair Allen and others at many an occasion through the bill process, there is a very cluttered policy landscape, both in terms of organisations, public bodies, as well as a broader range of stakeholders. And it will be an incredibly important part of the development of the Scottish Food Commission for it to navigate its space and its place within that policy landscape, and to negotiate the way in which it will formally work and informally work with a whole range of stakeholders. There is the precariousness of production, third sector organisations on the front line, workers' rights and marginalised groups, in addition to what I mentioned earlier on of the acute cost of living crisis, is something that I palpably witnessed as I toured Scotland. And it really scared the living daylights out of me in terms of what we might lose in parts of the country, that if we lose certain types of production, we will never get them back, in particular in dairy and in other sectors. I think also we are not through COVID-19. I don't know if I'm the only person, but almost everyone I know has COVID-19 at the moment, more so than ever before. We still have ongoing challenges around Brexit, as everyone knows, the war in Ukraine, climate crisis, and of course our public health crisis. So these are both acute, political, and chronic. And those crises are about to hold our feet to the fire, so to speak. But I do believe we need to draw strength and energy from these challenges to fuel our work going forward, restore our resolve, and God damn it, if possible, our energy reserves, our own personal energy reserves, and remind ourselves every day why we are fighting for and working towards food systems transformation. I'm going to tell a wee story now, and if I cry, I apologise, because I often do with this story. But for me, my daily reminder is a school I visited in Port Glasgow in 2017. I was emotionally floored by the poverty, fear, and sheer hopelessness that had infiltrated and became normalised in the children's lives, and the chronic stress, anxiety, and fear that the staff carried. And I only spent about 6 hours there. They and we all deserve better, and that memory motivates me every day. It's a national imperative that we make Scotland a healthier more sustainable and just society for all. You will all have your own personal and or professional stories or experiences that fuel you, and I implore you to channel them as we drive forward with the bill, support the creation of the Independent Scottish Food Commission, and work with the development and implementation of a Good Food Nation, our Good Food Nation plans. And as you can see, my inability to tell that story without getting emotional is why I'm not a politician. Okay, so next slide, please. So alongside, so I have been on sabbatical for the last 10 months after a very demanding period in my day job. And I was expecting to sit back and enjoy myself and produce this report, and it would have been marvellous. But along came the Good Food Nation bill and its publication just in the early stages of the sabbatical. But what we have managed to do is, in parallel and alongside, was to undertake a piece of work on behalf of the Scottish Food Coalition, and with very generous support from the Economic, Social and Research Council, to look at and to create a revised and updated evidence base for why a Good Food Nation for Scotland was so necessary. And we published it in May, just in advance of the stage 3 process. And I just wanted to highlight the cross-cutting themes that emerged. We took evidence from all of our members. We also did significant desk-based research, and Claire is on the line. Claire was the main researcher who was supporting it. And we got evidence from the vast majority of our members, who both submitted their organisational perspectives as well as additional published material. And through detailed analysis and multiple mind mapping, etc., we settled on and came to a set of 9 cross-cutting themes that really underpin food systems transformation, and have reflected on those in the context of Scotland. And what this report tries to do is to bring a collective voice from across our organisations and from across the evidence base to provide a balanced, though hopefully inspirational insight into how we can take Scotland on this Good Food Nation journey. So the key areas being public health and well-being, climate and nature, farming and fishing, animal and fish welfare and well-being, food markets and businesses, food sector workers, food access and affordability, public food, and food environments and culture. And none of these are more important than the other. It was about demonstrating that it is the connection and the balance and the coherency between them that will help us to drive stuff forward. Next slide, please. And what we were able to see through the evidence was this strong sense of our broken food system, and a system that is not working for the people, for environment, for our animals, and for our health. And a system that is littered with inequalities and insecurities throughout the supply chain and into households. Farming and fishing that is unsustainable, both economically and as well as environmentally and socially, and the cost of living and the cost of inputs has really brought those choices that we have for so long made and believed were the norm, the only ways of doing things, into stark contrast. There is evidence and still a sort of prevailing in places cost-driven public food approach to sort of do things as cheaply as possible without recognizing the multiple benefits and the core value that, in particular, for example, school food delivers to our young people. We have unhealthy food environments that drive us to make or facilitate us or require us, and sometimes to make unwise food choices. Climate and nature crisis that is at a pinnacle. Undervalued food sector workers who are struggling to feed themselves, not a mind serve the nation the food that we need. poor, though evolving, but poor animal and fish welfare, rising dietary related illnesses and extractive supply chains who are not necessarily in it for a broader societal good. And I know that some of that is controversial, but it is these pieces that are at the heart of the challenges that our analysis brought through. So from that, we have looked to work and develop a stronger vision for and ideas for how to take things forward. Next slide. Before I hand over to Mies, I just wanted to, why it is so important to understand those core themes and the associated aspects that have led to the breakdown and challenges within our food system is also how complex and cross-cutting and at times mutually exclusive policy and operational landscape that we are operating in. So in the best examples of local authorities that I have been visiting recently, you will see how the net zero and circular economy team are working closely with the education and school food team, who are also working with community empowerment and wealth building to see how they can support jobs, how they can grow businesses, how they can extend community food growing opportunities, and how they can support greater local procurement of food while also delivering in these key individual policy areas. But in the area in local authorities where this is not happening, or even at national level at times, you have policies that are mutually exclusive, that might be working against each other, that are not recognizing the importance that planning, housing, transport and other infrastructure has on the ability to create jobs, to drive community cohesion, to support local procurement, for example. So I think this breadth of complex and cross-cutting policy areas, we need to be able to hold, we need to be able to understand the place and role and contribution that food plays, and need to recognize that there may be different solutions in different regions or in different contexts. Next slide, please. And finally, at the heart, and I mentioned this, at the heart of what the bill is trying to do is a complex balancing act. It is putting down the challenge both to national and local government and health boards to say we are wanting and driving for a much more complex balancing act that allows us to deliver multiple benefits from the money we invest in food, in particular through public food, but not exclusively, in order to drive economic development and well-being. We want that money to work harder within our local communities and within the broader Scottish economy. We want to drive stronger health and well-being outcomes, both for our people and our animals, fish, land and water. To use our public food and the money that we are investing to tackle environmental challenges around climate change, wildlife and natural environment. And also to drive stronger social outcomes around education, poverty, isolation, wider well-being. And of course, also in terms of health and well-being, this is also a mixture of physical and mental well-being. And I think that I will just hand over to Mies now, if I'm on my right slide, Mies, and Mies will just give a few insights into some of the case studies we've looked into.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, maybe the best way to follow what Mary's been saying on the complications of everything is to say that we were really keen to not just dwell on the challenges of the that our food system brings. It's obvious that they're really tough and they're really interconnected and can't be underestimated. But we also wanted the report to have a really positive slant and to strike that note of what Mary already talked about celebrating what's already good happening out there and can be rolled out, maybe replicated and celebrated. So we made sure that we had to provide also a toolkit, if you like, for the local authorities who will be required to make all these plans, and to look at the case studies that are already happening there, to describe them in detail and come up with what the barriers might be if we are thinking of scaling them up. So we asked our coalition, all the members, when we asked for their contributions last summer. It seems like an awful long time ago. What for them would a better Good Food Nation look like? So we have the why we need to change things and need a Good Food Nation, but we also have a how, as in what can we do to make it look better, and what sorts of things would need to be happening first, the different steps that we should be taking to bring that about. They came up with some amazing vision statements from each of their organizations, showing really enthusiastically all the good practice that's already out there and that we could collate and draw attention to and celebrate, as I say. So we turned that into the 9 themes, the short vision statements, about 200 to 300 words, and chapter 3 looks like what better can look like in a Good Food Nation, and that's on all the different 9 topics. So how do we think about food poverty and bring about food secure households? What does sustainable farming and fishing look like, etc., on all the 9 themes? Next slide, please, Tamara. We sent Mary on a tour to go right across Scotland. We asked for her to, she visited about 30 case studies. She started in February in Shetland and visited a whole range of things. She went down to as far as the borders, and from the far west to the Outer Hebrides to the far east, a farm in Aberdeen that was on trying to do bird conservation. A whole lot of different case studies right across the different themes, from community projects that focused on well-being and gardening to food poverty, supplements, and really important enabling projects, to wholesalers who tried to set up short supply chains, to local cafes and bakeries shipping their food right across their local communities and investing in local economies, to small private businesses doing their thing, to ethical farms trying to make life better for their animals. A whole lot of different case studies, as I say. So we tried to represent the full range of themes. So Mary went round, interviewed, photographed, documented, sent back her notes in a blog, and you can read all about it on the SFC website. What they were trying to do, the brilliant successes that each project is achieving, and the hope they inspire, really. You know, our vision statements already happening to some small extent in real time in Scotland, so we can build on those. A couple of individual case studies are these 2 on the slide here. One is a circular, trying to address circular economy circular economy problems that we have. We don't talk about food waste very much these days, and it's actually not one of our themes, but it's behind almost every slide. Food waste is built into our system because it's easier not to do anything about it and just to have that waste built in. It's cheaper to do so, and that really needs to change if we're talking about shortage of food, food insecurity, the waste and just the emissions that come with all that food that's wasted. So we visited, or I should say, Mary visited the Bin Eco Park near Perth to look at how they're turning food waste into, by anaerobic digestion, into gas and eventually electricity, and also organic fertilizer. They employ about 150 staff, there. They have a close relationship with local farmers, and they're building a new plant to expand their work and collect a lot more of their food waste in future. Another a very different case study she visited was the food train people. Really shocking statistics about how the occurrence of malnourishment, and particularly in elderly people, and what the food train is trying to do about this. Taking shopping lists from elderly people, delivering it on their doorstep, some domestic tasks being done at the same time, just all to emphasize that food is a key ingredient of people being well, and addressing the point that actually, if you look at what the care sector talks about, there's very little mention of food, where it should really be doing the heavy lifting and people getting better. And next slide, please, Tamara. We also realized that these case studies are really complex, and often when they collaborate, they make up a really powerful way of how they can make a difference together. And part of what we're recommending, and our learnings have come from these visits, is how a collaborative network of these different case studies is so much more powerful, and establishing that collaboration and partnership work is really important to make an actual difference. So for example, the one on the left is the shorts of how these different businesses are establishing a short supply chain for their organic produce. Supply chains are a really troublesome kind of challenge, in that the supermarkets can easily undercut, if you like, and it's very hard for them, the supermarkets, to deal with these little producers. So finding markets is one of the main challenges. So here we have the ethical dairy in the west, Galloway and Dumfries, from Dumfries and Galloway, taking their beautiful calves who have stayed with their mothers for most of a year, all the way across to the east, where Pelham Farm near North Berwick is selling their meat, processing it in their local butchers, and selling it on through Locavor, who has different kinds of different shops selling directly to customers in the Central Belt. Unfortunately, a lot of this meat also goes down the M1 down to London, where there are more affluent customers that can afford the margins that need to be made for this quality food. A really good example of short supply chains, cutting out big distributors, local investment in lots of jobs, high animal welfare, all good, of course. A similar example is what's going on in Shetland, with a really vibrant local food economy, where the local authorities invested in setting up upgrading, if you like, their local fish auction to a state-of-the-art enterprise. The Shetland dairies are supplying their local primary schools, the Sandwich bakeries that are transporting their baked goods all over the island through local transport, local buses. And then there's Mackenzie's Cafe, for example, that is selling locally all their locally grown produce and taking on their neighbors' goods as well. All again, really important collaborative networks, but also quite fragile. And that's the next slide, please, Tamara, very quickly. What we have learned from these examples is that there are lots of challenges. They can be very fragile, these businesses, because they are the big actors who can come in and get planning permission for a shop on the high street or on the outskirts of town that suddenly takes away all their clientele overnight. There are bureaucratic hurdles. People are on short-term and restricted funding that isn't renewed. There's the bureaucracy that they have to struggle with. yeah, I don't really want to dwell on this because I think Mary is going to take that on in her next
Yeah,
slides.
I'll take it on. I am going to try and speed myself up because I've taken too long. But Mies, thank you very much for that. And we'll just Tamara, if we can just quickly go through the next few slides. These are just some further examples of places that I visited that help you to show the magic of what's happening and how farms and businesses are bringing to life our vision, but also what is thwarting them. I will include these are in the presentation, so I will include them and we'll send it out to all of you, but I won't dwell on them. I would tell you that Woodside Farm in Arran is one of the most inspirational places I've been, and the other thing that I've taken from my studies is my tour is the magic of the Keter House or the polycrub and the role that I think this very low-tech solution will play. If we could go forward, Tamara, a few slides. So yes, and go, that's a Shetland example, and you can read it in your own time. Next slide. The wonderful Maxwell Centre in Dundee, an example of just quite what a community centre can do when you have specialist full-time employees who are supporting volunteers in the communities. And instead of the schools having separate gardens in their own schools, they all have their plots in the community garden supported by a community gardener, but they are thwarted by short-term funding challenges, precarious funding, increasing demand for their services. Next slide. So our vision for the Good Food Nation is around how, through this strong legislative framework, we can pull our pieces of the jigsaw together, that there will be a development of interconnected plans with a common set of agreed outcomes, clear and though evolving indicators of progress, strong local flexibility in planning and delivery and recognition of different starting points. One of the things I'm quite concerned about, but I think will be something that evolves, is the choreography of the reporting and the review and the relationship between the Scottish Food Coalition and the process of reporting and synthesis of local and national plans. That strong independent oversight and capacity to recommend and to advise both national government and local government and health boards. And then the opportunity for stronger policy coherence. Next slide. So as I said, we are now at where the real work, in the final slide then, Tamara. So where we are at is about how do we make food better through this Good Food Nation bill, and I think a joined up approach is absolutely essential. I would have some remaining concerns, and I think that is shared by others, around how we establish the cycles of planning, implementation, monitoring, how we align legislation, policies, incentives, how we work with local communities who are so exhausted by the personal and professional challenges that the last few years have dealt out, how we recognise different starting points. And there is some fantastic partnership working already happening. I'm just going to name check one. It's the new Scottish School Meals Handbook developed by Assist FM and with support from Breaks, in developing an integrated Scottish school meals set of recipes, some of the really fascinating work on food waste, and also the strong local and regional tenders that have been happening at a local authority level or between groups of local authorities. The other important one, it's not being highlighted by me so far, is again, and it's not strong in the bill, is the importance that we link our outcomes and agreed indicators of progress to the Sustainable Development Goals, which the Scottish Government has signed up to, our National Performance Framework and the National Planning Framework. I think we absolutely need a dynamic, agile, creative Scottish Food Commission, one that is not heavy in bureaucracy, but one that is advocating and brave in how it scrutinises and reports and advises. We need to really hone who produces and scrutinises the progress reports and how the local plans will feed into our national assessment of progress. We need to ensure that materials and communication are inclusive and that allow all groups the information they need in a format that is accessible to them and that allows them to express themselves in ways that best meet their needs. And for the plans themselves, my call to action to the local authorities and health boards is to start doing a forensic analysis of your current local situation. How is each local authority and health board currently doing food? And how does food intersect with and across all your other policy priorities and operations? What is the experience, the lived experience of food in households across your local authority and in schools and other public institutions? And also, very importantly, I think we need to really understand and integrate the role of third-party providers in delivering school food, community food, emergency food, local food growing, health and social care services, institutional public food, research and evaluation and business support, accreditation, and tendering and other legal and professional services, because many of those frontline services are actually delivered through subcontracts or third sector or other public bodies. And it is recognizing the relationship and the connection and the interdependencies that local authorities have on a range of providers and support organizations and accrediting bodies. And I think, I suppose to end, again, I think there is a huge amount of work to do. I think success will be dependent on our willingness to collaborate, our willingness to be open with across our local authorities and health boards, to recognise the important step and seminal moment that this offers in terms of the health and environmental and social and economic outcomes for Scotland. And to also support and drive that strong independent scrutiny and accountability that will be brought through the planning and commission and what the planning process offers, the establishment of these planning, implementation, monitoring and review cycles, which are now a legislative requirement and not at the whim of a cabinet secretary or not at the whim of a local authority that decides whether they can or can't do it. So I am, as you may have gathered, very positive around what we have done. I am very aware of the challenges going forward and the work that needs to be done. But I think through what we have achieved in this report and through the advocacy that the Scottish Food Coalition has delivered, we have demonstrated why working collectively and why embracing systems thinking can help us to move forward and shift the dialogue and shift the debate around food systems transformation. Thank you very much, and I'll hand over to Claire now. So if you have any questions, we will hopefully be able to rattle through, and if people can stay 2 or 3 minutes longer, hopefully we will get through everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I think quite a few comments where we did call mine, which is a massive thank you for such a great presentation and the commitment of members, of coalition members, to the report. In terms of questions, so I'm going to try to do a few in one. I think one of the key issues going forward, what would you say are going to be the main obstacles and the main issues that we're going to have to confront? And perhaps how can we learn from what we've done so far to push the food policy agenda both in Scotland and across the UK, with some people taking mention of the National Food Strategy in England?
Yes, and we did not choreograph the Good Food Nation Bill to go through Parliament on the same within 24 hours of the National Food Strategy in England. It was pure chance. I think some of the major challenges will actually be quite acute and be quite sort of what is facing people in their day-to-day jobs. I think it will be to do with resources. I think it will to do with workforce challenges. It will be to do with the capacity to think creatively and to appreciate that while change and forensic analysis and deep reflection will be required, is that we have to start somewhere. And I think the challenge will be that people are so tired and so taken up with the operational challenges much of what they're doing, that they find it difficult to see beyond where they're at. I think there are clear resource challenges, both human and financial, and I think I am very aware of the pressure that this may place on local authorities. But I also am absolutely certain through the local authorities that I have engaged with, that those who engage with this strategically and creatively have been able to deliver multiple benefits across their local authorities. And I see someone has mentioned the drones in Argyll and Bute. I mean, yes, it's a great news story, but it's just a fascinating way of how do you overcome really tricky logistical challenges. Sometimes it's really innovative, and sometimes it's high tech, and sometimes it's low tech. So I think it will also be there will need to be a willingness, and also, again, I think some of it is around vulnerability for different stakeholders and different players within the food system to sit at the same table, to understand their place and their role in food systems transformation, and to buy into more than just their own organizational objectives.
Yeah, and that leads to that quite well to a few questions that are related to, you know, involvement of perhaps business and industry, as well as DNFU, both in the coalition work, but also going forward in the commission. So how do you think we should approach this? If you could, give us a few thoughts on that.
we have to approach it, and it sounds very fluffy and social sciencey, which I am, is to say we have to welcome all parties and with all interest, but also to respect that no party or no stakeholder should have more power and influence in the way in which we evolve this. And I think that is the process of taking evidence and the process of recognizing the range of views and positions, I think was an example of that. I think the embedding and the requirement for clear consultation, both in the development of plans and in the review of in the reports that will be developed during the process of review, and I think the role that the independent commission will play in working with a real breadth of organisations will be central to that, because as we stand, we do, and I have agreed with Alistair Allen repeatedly that we do have a cluttered policy landscape, but we had no organisation that pulled together the range of positions and views. We have had representation within the coalition for food growers and for producers in particular in more sustainable regenerative agriculture, but I think obviously the farming unions and others will and including Scotland Food and Drink will play a huge role going forward. And I think there will need to be formal mechanisms for how they will engage with and possibly respond to the Food Commission.
Thank you, Mary. We've just gone past 2, so I wouldn't want to take much.
I'm just saying, so yes, I think what we have done in Scotland has been an example of much more inclusive policy and legislative development. I think there has been a long journey and a winding road, but I think it is very clear, I believe, that stakeholders have had space within it. They might not have got everything that they asked for, but it has been a much more open process of consultation and policy and legislative development. Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but one that I think we need to celebrate when you compare it with what happened in Westminster in recent weeks. I'm just seeing if anyone has any other questions that they wish. I will take a little bit of time here, and I can add further comments, but also please do not hesitate to contact me or others within the Scottish Food Coalition, and if you are wanting any more detail or any more insights, there will be a bit more work. I'm working on a more reflective sort of analysis of all those 30 case studies that I've got to. So yes, as me said, I have a lot of notes, I have a lot of blogs, but I need to pull together those collective learnings. But I think you should be you should look to each other, you should explore the opportunities that are available, and to think creatively about partnerships, and to, just because things may not have been done in the past like this doesn't mean that we can't change the way in which we support and deliver a good food nation.
Thank you, Mary.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and we look forward to engaging and continuing the discussion going forward.